Shaura, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name's Shaura Hall. I'm a mind and body educator. My specialism is in yoga. I'm a yoga therapist, yoga teacher trainer, yoga teacher and yoga student. I have been teaching yoga for around about 10 years. My path began with the Kundalini tradition, which is a very spiritual practice, spiritual form of yoga. Since 2011, I trained with the Minded Institute and Heather Mason, which was a yoga therapy program based in neurobiology and Eastern sciences. From then, I have changed the way that I teach to include both the East and the Western approach. So yoga with me tends to have a sense of groundedness within Western sciences, but completely and utterly honours, respects and finds the Eastern approach to be woven through the practice.
So Shaura, you've spoken there a little bit about Kundalini yoga, you've mentioned hatha yoga, and you've talked about blending Western science and Eastern philosophy. How does that practically translate into the sort of yoga that you teach?
That's a fab question. Okay. So the yoga that I teach really depends upon the population. So one of the specialisms that I work in is yoga therapy for addictions. I also work to share a neurobiological approach to different forms of yoga. So depending on where I am and what I'm doing, yoga can mean many things and yoga can turn out in many ways. For instance, if I'm running a Kundalini practice, it's a very, very spiritual practice, and I'm looking to hold the space for individuals to be able to reach an aspect of themselves that is not necessarily attainable during a regular practice. If I'm working with individuals who have suffered with anxiety or depression, I will work through the medium of hatha yoga. We would look from a neurobiological approach to understand what is happening in their nervous system, and I would be looking to ground them into their bodies and be able to give the individual the tools to be able to regulate the nervous system via the body and the breath. So even though there would be Eastern or philosophical or my subtle understanding to what is happening in the yoga class, we are approaching from a scientific perspective the question of how do we bring balance into this nervous system.
Thank you for explaining so much about the therapeutic aspects to your yoga practice. So if somebody like me came to see you to talk about how I would practice yoga with you, what would your approach be?
So that would depend on where you were at that day and where you were in your practice, if you had a practice. So it would really and utterly depend upon how you presented in that day. So you may show up and, after our conversation and initial assessment, whether it be an assessment session or just my assessment of what's happening in the moment, it may be that working through the body to ground you into the physiological systems and actually have a sense of groundedness to ground may be appropriate. It may be that we might work through the breath, or it may be that we might work through a relaxation technique. It may be that you got to a point within your own spiritual and physical practice where there's where you reach kind of a wall or a sticking point, and then I would begin to consider whether a Kundalini practice would be useful for you. So basically there would be no set idea to what we would do until you showed up. We would have a conversation, and then it would all be down to whatever tools I felt were in the bag that would be appropriate for you on that day, whether it be a hatha yoga practice, a yoga nidra practice, a yin yoga practice, a Kundalini practice, a breath practice, a mindfulness practice. Any of those practices all blend together to make a therapeutic approach to yoga.
Can you tell us a little bit about the teacher training that you've just delivered? This was the first cohort, I think, to complete the Pilamaya Hatha Yoga teacher training. How was that? What was that like?
I would love to tell you a little bit more about that. So the first teacher training has just completed and has been a very, very powerful time for both myself and a group of women. So the Pillar Maya teacher training almost rolls in as much of my experience up to date as possible. We have effectively blended together a very good foundation of science-based understanding of the physiological systems that are important and necessary to understand in yoga. We've put that side by side with what the Eastern scholars have believed for a long period of time happens within the subtle energy systems in yoga, and we found many correlations. In addition to that, what I most wanted to impart to this group of students, and I believe has successfully happened, is that each and every individual has a unique yoga signature, and to be able to hold the space for individuals to cultivate their unique yoga signature has been a great honour for me. The difference in this yoga teacher training is just that. We work through whatever medium we can to elicit knowledge, self-expression, understanding and unique signature for the Pillar Maya yoginis.
One of the unique things about your teacher training is your stated aim to empower your students to deepen and broaden their practice and take them beyond their comfort zone of delivery of technique. Can you tell us a little more about that and the rationale behind it as well?
Yes. So yes, I believe strongly that as with anything in life that is worth developing and cultivating, there has to be a level of transformation that occurs for us to step outside of our capacity, or another phrase would be window of tolerance. So during this teacher training program, we've created safety, so there has to be a level of safety created for a group that will go through a transformative process. And each time the students have felt that they have got to a place, or each time it has become clear that the students have got to a place where they have plateaued within their practice and understanding of yoga, it means the window must be pushed a tiny little bit further so that they can reach a level of excellence that they didn't know existed inside of them.
Can you tell us what drives your passion to blend together the Western and Eastern sciences and philosophies, and drives that belief in the power of training new teachers?
First of all, I want to state that the learning of Western science has not necessarily come very easy in the last 5 or 6 years, but has developed a sense of enthusiasm in me and has seeded the passion that drives me to keep learning and keep sharing and delivering to go home. And this is because very often I hear people think that to take up a yoga practice means that they have to become religious and take up a Hindu or another Eastern philosophy. And whilst yoga has been developed from the East, and the Eastern philosophies are really beautiful philosophies to delve into, it is not necessary for individuals to have to take up anything that doesn't feel right for them. So to be able to understand the mechanisms within the physiological systems and to be able to teach people to understand those mechanisms essentially means that yoga becomes more available for all. And in the long run, when we begin to arm ourselves with knowledge that comes from Eastern and Western traditions, we learn both sets of languages so that we can sit with an Eastern set of language and an Eastern understanding about what this practice is about, yet we understand from a Western point of view exactly what happens in the body when we make specific shapes in the air, when we develop our concentration, when we regulate the nervous system. And from this perspective, teaching teachers to be able to understand both of these sides of the coins mean that yoga from their teaching styles will be able to reach out to many, many more people. And the long run in that, and the long run that we're moving towards, and the long run that my colleagues at Minded Institute are moving towards, is to be able to get yoga accessible and available on the NHS, which means that we empower more people to be able to live a life without suffering. So Gail,
Yes.
as the founder of Dancing Warriors, I was blessed that you delivered a coaching session to the Pillar Maya cohort, and I am very blessed that you will be delivering a whole day to the 2017 year cohort. Can you tell me, as a coach and a yoga teacher and a lifelong successful businesswoman, what benefits do you feel that future yoga teacher trainees will get from a day's coaching with you?
I think it is of paramount importance that yoga trainers, as indeed all women in business, realise the potential that they have within them. And I think the workshop that I ran on the Pillar Maya teacher training recently really indicated that whilst those students of teacher training had a great sense of the sort of yoga they wanted to deliver, simple questions like, who is your ideal client? What is your product? What value do you put on yourself? What is stopping you? What is limiting you? Where do you go from here? Very practical things. But I think at the end of that session together, all of the cohort who were studying had a much greater sense, not only of their ability to teach yoga, but actually practically what it is that they uniquely could bring to different sorts of students, and also a real desire and belief in themselves to get out there and to do it. So you mentioned that my company is called Dancing Warriors, and that perhaps is a strange name for somebody who works as a coach to have a company called Dancing Warriors. But for me, Dancing Warriors are strong and fearless men and women who move with ease around obstacles and through adversity. So for me, Dancing Warriors, resilient leaders.
So we've been here talking about me. It's probably time for me to introduce Gail. So Gail and I have known each other for the last 2 years, and over the course of the 2 years we've become very close from a yoga teaching perspective. It became clear to me over the last couple of months that actually I needed some help to develop my business further and to be able to be effective enough to hold the space and develop excellent teachers. From this perspective, I decided to take Gail on as my coach. And why am I saying this? I believe as yoga teachers that we know what we want to do. We know that we want to make a difference. We know that we want to help people. We don't always know how to do it. And if there's any of you out there that are watching this video and you don't know how to do it, please contact Gail, because she's an extremely effective coach.